Welcome back to my kitchen. It is time for another weekly reset and kitchen restock. I am meal prepping today to get us prepped and our fridge stocked up for the week ahead. If you're new here, a big focus of mine in these videos is prepping protein because I find that that can be the part of the meal that I get hung up on if I am in a rush. So one of the things that I often like to do is cook a whole chicken in the Instant Pot. You can do this with a fresh or frozen chicken. Today I am using a frozen chicken. This is one of the smaller chickens that we raised last year. And for a 4 to 5 pound chicken from frozen, it takes about an hour at high pressure. Another thing that I often like to prep, a little bit boring, but a staple, is either soft boiled or hard boiled eggs. I guess technically these aren't boiled, these are steamed. This is the hack if you have a hard time peeling farm fresh eggs. So I will just bring some water to a boil in a pot with a steam basket. Once it comes to a boil, add the eggs in straight from the fridge, and I am going to steam these for 12 minutes. And that is going to make these super easy to peel. You'll see later in the video. Another high protein option that I'm prepping this week is a tuna salad, but I'm going to be doing a little bit of a twist on this and I might lose some of you here, but I am going to be adding in some sardines. Now, I find that if I do 2 cans of tuna to 1 can of sardines, you really can't taste them. They do have the bone in, but again, once it's all mixed up with the tuna, you can't taste it, and the sardines are a great source of omega-3s, B12, selenium, so just a great way to add a little bit more nutrition into your basic tuna salad. You can see our dog Gunner in the background. He's hoping to get something good. So again, I'm doing 2 cans of wild albacore tuna and then 1 can of the sardines. And to that, I'm going to add a little bit of homemade avocado oil mayonnaise. If you have not made homemade mayonnaise before, it is super easy to do, and I'll leave that recipe in the description box down below. Now, one of my favorite things to can in the summer is just this dill pickle relish. We'll use a lot of pickles in things like tuna salad or egg salad, and making the dill pickle relish is a great way to use up any cucumbers that might be a little bit overgrown. So that is what I like to use that for. Great way to use up those cucumbers and just makes a really easy addition to this. I'm also adding in a little bit of pepper and some Dijon mustard and then just getting that all mixed up. After that 12 minutes is up, I am just getting a bowl filled with some cold water in the sink, transferring those eggs into that cold water. I don't even do an ice bath for this, and I'm just gonna let those chill there for probably at least 10 to 15 minutes or so, and those are going to peel really beautifully. I've mentioned before, but my go-to for lunches on a work day is snack plate type lunches. So I'll do some of this tuna and sardine salad or hard-boiled eggs, sometimes a little bit of both, as well as some grass-fed cheese, some chopped vegetables, maybe some homemade crackers and pickles, or some sauerkraut. Homemade crackers are something that I make most weeks. They are really simple to make, very affordable to make, and they have a lot better ingredients than the store-bought options. I need to eat gluten-free. I don't do very well with a lot of the gluten-free products on the market where they have a ton of different flours and additives added to them. And a lot of times, if you're looking for a high-quality cracker, they are quite expensive, and most of the time they do still have vegetable oils in them. So by making them at home, I can control the ingredients, and again, it's not difficult to do. So these crackers that I'm making today are an oat flour cracker. You can substitute in either a gluten-free all-purpose flour or just regular all-purpose flour for these. So I'll have the full recipe in the description box down below. But to a bowl, I am adding some oat flour, some baking powder, salt, and then you can really just do whatever kind of seasonings that you like. Today I'm doing garlic powder, some dried parsley, as well as some dried chives. Now at this point my chicken was done in the Instant Pot, and I just let that naturally release, and then I went ahead, removed the lid, and I'm just going to allow that to cool for a few minutes in the Instant Pot until it is cool enough to handle. Back to the crackers, I added in some melted butter and water, got that stirred together. At first with the oat flour, this will look a little bit more like a batter than it will a dough, but give it a few minutes and it will set up. Then I got a baking sheet lined with some parchment paper, transferred that cracker dough to the parchment paper lined baking sheet, and I'll just roll this out directly on the baking sheet and cut it, and then this will bake at 400 for about 15 minutes. Now that the eggs have cooled a little bit, they are ready to be peeled, and you'll see just how easily the peel comes off. So I typically will just tap each end and then give the egg a little bit of a roll to break up the shell, and the shell will come off in just a couple pieces, no issue whatsoever. This is the best hack that you need to try if you are working with farm fresh eggs. Now I always like to prep some sort of sweet treat. Oftentimes it is homemade gummies because I can make that really simply just with some of our home canned juice as well as some grass-fed beef gelatin, and that makes for a protein-rich but also sweet treat. Now today I am doing some coconut macaroons just to switch things up a little bit, and again these are a great option because they've got a good amount of fat and fiber from the coconut as well as protein from the egg whites. So for this you're going to need 5 egg whites. I just had a couple left over in the fridge and then separated out a couple more. Those egg yolks will not go to waste. We'll be adding those to some scrambled eggs tomorrow morning. Then I'm adding my egg whites to a large mixing bowl along with a couple pinches of salt, and then I'm just going to beat this with my hand mixer until stiff peaks form. Next, I'm folding in a good splash of vanilla extract along with some vanilla bean powder. That's not at all necessary, but it just adds some extra vanilla flavor, along with some shredded coconut. Again, the full recipe will be in the description box down below. Next, I'm adding 1/3 cup of honey to sweeten this up. This is raw honey from our bees last year. We checked our hives last weekend, or I should say my husband checked our hives last weekend. The bees are kind of his thing, and both survived winter, which is always great news. And we actually did order 2 more nukes, so we're going to be keeping 4 hives this year. This is a great recipe because there isn't a crazy amount of sugar in this, and then the protein from the egg whites along with the fat and the fiber in the shredded coconut is going to help prevent any crazy blood sugar spikes. I have my oven set to 350 and I'm lining a baking sheet with some parchment paper, and then I'm just using a small cookie scoop to portion these out onto that baking sheet, and these are going to bake for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now that my chicken has cooled enough to handle, I am removing all the meat from the bones. This is super easy to do when you cook it in the Instant Pot, and I'm just leaving all of the bones in the Instant Pot because I'm gonna go ahead and make a batch of bone broth right away. since I already have the Instant Pot dirty. And some of this meat I'm just going to save plain in the fridge to add to quick meals, and some of it I am going to turn into a curried chicken salad. To the bones in my Instant Pot, I'm adding some celery leaves that I dehydrated last year, along with some carrot, some onion, topping that all off with water, and I'm going to pressure cook this on high for 4 hours. Now, if I do this later in the day and I'm not going to have enough time to strain it and to cool it before I need to get it into the fridge before we go to bed, what I'll do is I'll just put the warm setting on so that it stays nice and hot in the Instant Pot until the next morning. Now, this will just be the broth that we use throughout the week, so I'll use this in things like soups, of course, or stews, but I also will cook any grains in the bone broth. So if I'm cooking rice, instead of cooking it in water, I'll be cooking that in the bone broth. That's going to add a lot of nutrition as well as flavor. As I mentioned, some of that chicken is just going to be stored plain in the fridge, and some of it I am keeping to turn into a curried chicken salad. Oftentimes I'll just do a plain chicken salad, but we needed to switch things up a little bit. So I'm adding in a couple tablespoons of that avocado oil mayonnaise. You can also add in some Greek yogurt if you want to avoid the mayonnaise. I'm adding in just a little bit of honey. Oftentimes you'll see in curried chicken salads, they will call for some raisins. I do not have any. I am totally out of the raisins that we dehydrated. So I just added a little bit of honey just to add that sweetness. Seasoning it with some salt, some pepper, curry powder, and then I'm adding in some sliced almonds for a little bit of crunch. I'm also going to be dicing up some onion and adding that in there as well. I also ended up adding in a splash of lemon juice just to add a little bit of acidity, and also just to thin out the mayonnaise a little bit to make that go a little bit further. So as you can see, this was very much so focused on protein, as I mentioned earlier in the video, but I did want to have some veggies just ready to go. So I got some carrots washed up and peeled and chopped into sticks so we can grab those as easy additions to our lunch plates. Thank you so much for joining me for another weekly reset and kitchen restock. It always feels great to get a little bit of meal prep done just to set us up well for the week ahead. I'll see you in the next video.